and move into special meeting of the Tourism Development Authority and the presentation of Tourism Development Authority budget for fiscal year 2018-2019. And with that, I'll hand it over to either Dan or...
You're handing it off to me.
Okay. I don't want to leave her out. She came up here. And she's wearing polka dots.
Welcome her too.
Right. The tourism director is a named member of the Tourism Development Authority, and therefore it's appropriate that she sit in the conversation about the budget. And in 2 weeks from now, as we mentioned earlier, with the potential adoption of this budget. But as a TDA, you sit as a separate legal entity as defined by statutes, and your responsibility is managing the budget of the occupancy tax. And so that's the budget that you'll be looking at right now. Just as a quick reminder, that occupancy tax is controlled by a state regulation that speaks to how we spend and limitations on the expenditure. There's actually three separate pieces. The purpose or the takeaway from the slide is to note the word promote travel and tourism versus promote related or tourism related expenditures. So there's restrictions that the amount of money that we collect will be put into one of those two buckets, and those buckets have limitations on it. If you apply the math toward the limitations, we're projecting next year to collect $10.5 million in occupancy tax in total. $3.5 million will need to be appropriated to promote travel and tourism, with a balance of $7 million for tourism-related expenditures. The other half of occupancy tax is the tourism-related expenditures. This is where a lot of the controversy and public dialogue exists on this side of the occupancy tax definition. But these funds are available in the discretion of the Board of Commissioners or in the judgment of the Board of Commissioners to be used for the use of lodging facilities, meeting facilities, recreational facilities, convention facilities by the county to attract tourists or business, and it also could be further used for beach nourishment. One portion of what this money is used for is it supports the operation at the Whalehead Club at Heritage Park. This is the budget being presented for that. One thing of note here is when the county resumed operational control over Heritage Park, before that we were spending about $800,000 a year of occupancy tax in support of that. You'll notice this is we're under $700,000. So several years later, staff is still operating this facility at a lower rate than what we had contracted its operation for. A lot of focus is in how we spent the remainder. So the tourism related outside of occupancy tax, these five things represents 80% of the remaining money to be spent. It is in order. Occupancy tax pays for the additional cost associated with putting additional EMS units in the Outer Banks to account for the influx of tourism population that we experience. Our population, as someone mentioned, I believe earlier, year-round is about 26,000. It explodes to 60 to 70,000 during the summer. That influx of additional population requires additional public service. So it's the additional cost of EMS services. At the same time, additional law enforcement is deployed onto the Outer Banks to account for the influx of that population. So $1.2 million of occupancy tax goes to reimburse or to cover that cost. The Connecting Crawler is a plan, a document that was prepared several years ago that listed out several capital improvements to be conducted throughout the Corolla area that we have systematically been moving down that list. That list included, over the years, the multi-use path, which the county has completed 5 miles of multi-use path. It included the signage package that was rolled out. And so in next year, the upcoming year, we're proposing to budget a little over $1 million The specific project, the primary project that will be responsible for funding, will be going back to the multi-use path and looking at closing the gap that exists between the Monterey Shores community. They have a sidewalk in their subdivision, and the sidewalk that exists in Corolla Light. There's a gap there around where the Mid-Currituck Bridge is proposed to come through. So that is our primary project to go in and look at, working with NCDOT and what we can do. I would anticipate it's going to be a combination of some area will be the multi-use path as it is existing elsewhere on the beach, and some of it that's identified within the construction area will be something of a little bit lesser standard, but at least it would provide a continuity to be able to move from the food line all the way up to basically the North Beach ramp at that stage. That would be the primary project that we'll be looking at. The fourth item on that list, the lifeguard services, that's to cover next year's contract. The last item is professional services. What the board has asked is that we put money aside after we had the presentation from the engineering firm that was doing some work on Dare County. The board asked or thought it was appropriate to move forward now and gathering appropriate data so that in the future the board can make educated decisions on the rate of erosion and at various points along our Outer Banks. Pine Island, I believe, had an engineering firm that had did about 3 miles or 5 miles of the beach that would be from the Dare County line up 5 miles. So we appropriated some additional money to go from where the Pine Island study ended to about 5 miles beyond the North Beach access ramp to focus on that area, undertaking a similar study so that we could start looking again at the impacts and the rate of beach erosion that's occurring in that area. So we're putting money aside to be able to support that contract. In addition, there's money in there. We have 10 acres of unimproved land in Corolla that we talked about at the board's retreat to go ahead and at a minimum look at putting some civil work in place and creating a permanent air up, air down station. And as we've been approached by the ABC board, they're looking for a future home for a larger store in Corolla, and it could potentially be located at the 10 acres. So we would need to be able to get the site in a position where they at least can access it and go ahead and do construction. So those five items represent 80% of the tourism related. The remaining is in the basic contracts to maintain the multi-use path, to mow the grass, to maintain the public access facilities, maintain the public access beaches. So that would be the residual of that. This budget also is publicly available and can be inspected online. It's being presented tonight, and just like your other budget, in 2 weeks we will schedule a public hearing, which time the public can have comment on it, and the board can either adopt the budget at that meeting or have a future meeting as long as the budget is adopted by July 1st. And again, it's available in my office and it is available online as we speak. And with that, I'll be happy to answer any specific questions you might have about the occupancy tax budget.
Does anyone have any questions or statements in regards to the budget? Thank you, Mr. Scanlon. With that, I'll call for a motion to adjourn the special meeting of the TDA.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye.